And we're inside, up on the second floor, where our studios are set up right in the hallway here. And for the next half hour, we're going to talk about Burlington and Vermont. Bernie Sanders, what is Burlington, Vermont?
Burlington, Vermont is one of the great cities in America, and I think, now I'm a little prejudiced, I was mayor here for 8 years, but I think it is the most beautiful and spectacular small city in America, and I think a lot of people agree with that assessment.
Garrison Nelson, how would you describe Burlington and Vermont?
Burlington is the most unique political city in America. It's the only city with 3 political parties. And Vermont, which had been the most Republican state for a century, is now the only state with a Democratic governor in the Northeast. So Vermont has gone through a major transformation. Burlington has led that transformation.
I haven't been here that long, but I've been here about 24 hours, and what I've seen here is a lot of demonstrations. Downtown, people demonstrating all kinds of things. Where does that come from?
I was demonstrating.
Yesterday?
Absolutely.
For what?
They're demonstrating against the nonsense that's going on in Washington and the pomposity of many of these governors here who are backing the contract with America, which is one of the great frauds ever perpetrated on the American people. The people, yesterday we had some 2,200 people in Vermont out, some from out of state, most from Vermont. And what they said, it's insane to be giving huge tax breaks for the rich, to be building more B-2 bombers, spending more money on the military, and cutting back on programs for the children, slashing Medicare, cutting back on veterans programs. That what Gingrich and his friends are doing is a crime. And I'm very proud that here in the city of Burlington and throughout the state of Vermont, we have many people who are standing up and say, this is garbage and we got to fight back.
Were you demonstrating, Mr. Nelson?
I was watching the demonstrations, and I sort of observe what's happening. This is a city that which basically tolerates a high level of political protest, and the state does as well. The state was pioneers, you know, in the abolition of slavery, and it's a state which really has been on the cutting edge of a lot of social change. As a matter of fact, even the Republicans who were elected were very liberal to moderate Republicans who often found themselves at odds with the National Republican Party. So Vermont is a state which is very liberal politically, and so this protest can find a home here, and people don't mind, and let people do their business.
Let me just ask you this out of the blue. The Burlington Free Press here on the...
I've heard of that paper. Yes.
You've heard of that paper?
Problems with it, but I have heard of it.
Did they support you?
Actually, amazingly enough, let me give you a little history. When I was first elected, Mayor, you remember that, Gary?
Sure do.
If it rained in Burlington, it was the fault of Mayor Bernie Sanders. And in fact, they went out of their way editorially to tell the Democrats and the Republicans not only that they should combine against me in my re-election effort as mayor, but they told the people who they should support. Times have changed, and actually we have won the endorsement of the Free Press for the last few elections.
By the way, where were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York.
When did you move here first?
In the mid-'60s.
Where were you born?
I was born in the Boston area, and I came in the mid-'60s. We were part of the same arrival in Vermont that took over the state back in the 60s. These are people I called the sort of yuppie expatriates from the cities, and they stayed in Vermont, and they became, instead of yuppies, they became marpies, middle-aged rural professionals, and they transformed the state.
Well, I would... See, we both came. You became a success, and look what happened to me.
You make far more money than I do.
But I would disagree with that interpretation. I think one of the things that we have tried to do, and when I was mayor of Burlington, is by talking about the important issues facing working people and middle-income people and low-income people, we have garnered support. And the reason that we've been successful in Burlington, and I think that I've been pretty successful statewide, is most people understand that the rich are getting richer, that increasingly big corporations control the political and economic life of this country. We've been talking those issues. We don't represent everybody. We try to represent working people and middle-income people, and we're trying to fight back for the interest of those people.
You were saying earlier, we were chatting, that it's in a state like this, even though that Bernie Sanders is over on the left or an independent, or I don't know if you still call yourself a socialist, but the right even votes for him.
Yeah, there's a constituency out of the Northeast Kingdom which tends to be relatively conservative. And as a matter of fact, when the National Rifle Association tried to mount a campaign against Bernie this past year, they didn't get unanimous support from many of the gun owners in the Northeast Kingdom. So I think there's some of Bernie's support, and Bernie didn't disagree here, is not wholly ideological. A lot of it's stylistic, and some of the kind of critical sort of anti-government rhetoric that Bernie's expressed, I think has found a home in some of the people.
I gave you some labels. You label yourself. What would you call yourself?
Well, most of these guys they call themselves Republicans and Democrats. They don't say I'm a capitalist politician, right? So I am an independent. That's how I've always run as mayor for Burlington and for Congress, as an independent. But if you ask me what my political philosophy is, I would say it is democratic socialist, in the spirit of the New Democratic Party in Canada, in the spirit of the British Labour Party and the Labour Party in Sweden and Scandinavia.
Here's what I started to ask you about earlier. This is the Burlington Free Press, and there's a headline here, Walmart among NGA backers. Yeah. Corporations footing the bill. Why would that headline find its way to the front page?
It's exactly the right headline. It should be on there. People should know that the reason that the rich get richer, that our jobs are going to Mexico, the corporations are downsizing, is that the major corporations, Walmart among many others, has tremendous sway over the political process. People should be concerned. Why is Walmart and every other corporation in the world funding this function? Is it because they like these governors? Is it because they're concerned about the political process? You have to be an idiot to believe that. They are here to give influence to their corporations on the political process. When they go back to the state houses, they will have more access to the governors and the statewide leaders. It is the crisis of American politics. The big money interest influence what's going on, and the fact that corporations are funding the bill here is part of the process.
It says in this article on the front page by Betsy Lilly.
Betsy Liley.
Liley,
our fine reporter, standing right here.
She is.
She's hearing every word you say.
Nice way to meet who you're talking about.
He wanted to say that you're doing a great job, brilliant article.
We will show her on the screen here, I hope, in just a moment, so everybody can know who we're talking about. Didn't mean to embarrass you. Walmart was among 6 contributors contacted by Governor Howard Dean that each ponied up $30,000 to $50,000 to help pay for the upcoming meeting of the National Governors Association. The 6 were top donors among 83 that contributed the $800,000 necessary to hold the 4-day NGA meeting starting Saturday in Burlington. Is this a typical kind of an article you'll find on the front page?
Not really. The NGA has been big news, the moment it was announced. Matter of fact, the NGA and the Grateful Dead visit a month ago. The Free Press has lived off these 2 events. So, but this was, so this particular tag on, but Walmart is a source of great controversy in the state. Vermont has fought vigorously to keep Walmart out, and of course, so Walmart is, you might say, symbol of sort of the corporate intrusion into Vermont that Vermonters that has been supportive of Bernie find offensive. So that's why that headline plays.
Let's say you were born and raised in a conservative community and you've never been here and you've never known what it's like to live in a community that you were mayor of for 8 years. What's the first surprise someone would have coming out of a very conservative town?
Well, first of all, they would find that the mayor of the city of Burlington for the last 14 out of 16 years is not a Democrat, not a Republican. And people say, what? I thought there were only 2 parties in America. How could that happen? In the city of Burlington, we have forged a 3rd party called the Progressive Coalition, which today has the mayor's office. Peter Clavell is the mayor, and he replaced me, then he lost, and he's back again. So as Gary indicated, uniquely in America, to the best of my knowledge, we are the only city in America. We have 3 parties, and right now the progressives have defeated the Democrats and the Republicans.
What's the thing they would notice that would be different about living here?
About what?
Living here. I mean,
it's a fantastic city in this sense, okay? If you're in downtown Burlington, we have a very vibrant downtown. We have a lovely mall throughout the city. What you would notice is that 5 minutes away, you walk down the hill, you're on beautiful Lake Champlain, you're going to go to a boathouse where you can rent boats for a few bucks. There's a wonderful 9-mile bike path, which is gorgeous, well utilized by people of all ages. As you drive, if you ride along the bike path, or you skate along the bike path, there are 4 separate beaches that you can walk into free of charge and enjoy that. On Thursday nights, you'll find free concerts out at our summer park. In the spring, summer, and fall, this community is very active in terms of cultural activities and the arts. If you walk around looking for slums, you're not going to find any. What you will find is low-income areas. We put a lot of money into revitalizing those low-income areas, rehabilitating the houses. You're going to find our parks in excellent condition, really excellent. Beautiful tennis courts. You're going to go to at least 1 or 2 of the parks, and you'll say, this is a people's country club. You have swimming, you have tennis, you have softball, you have a very low crime rate in our city and in our state. So I think you would find the city just a really beautiful place to visit.
That's a live picture you saw there on the screen of a mountain here right outside of this building. I want to, speaking of mountains, Garrison Nelson, what in the world is this thing that you brought along?
Well, that is volume 2 of an eventual 7-volume compilation of every single committee of the United States Congress, every single committee assignment. As Bernie knows well, it's in the committees of the Congress that the work gets done. And this is one of, there are 100,000 committee assignments have been named since 1789 up till the present, and this is volume 2 of the book. This is arranged by member. It can be accessed on Westlaw. It can be purchased by Congressional Quarterly.
For how many thousands of dollars does that thing cost?
Oh, it's $230 a volume for volume 2, $235 for volume 1, $340 for the set.
But for you, Brian, we're prepared to make a deal.
This is a gift. This is a gift to
can't accept gifts like this.
Accept gifts. Oh, I didn't realize that. I brought this to Parliament back in March, and with an Irish face and an 8.5-pound book, I was stopped 6 times thinking it was a bomb.
Let's take a couple of telephone calls for our 2 guests. Fayetteville, Tennessee, you're our first caller for this segment. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Governor Tucker made a comment a while ago that kind of got my dander up. He said that the government couldn't afford to give the working people of this country a tax cut. I don't know what makes politicians think it's their money to start with. It's not. It's our money, and they're not giving us anything.
All right, thanks.
I believe that we have a very unfair tax system. As the caller may know, since 1977, taxes have gone down for the very richest people in America. But what has happened is, as a result of the increase in Social Security taxes and a lot of state and local taxes, which are often regressive taxes, working people, middle-income people are paying more in taxes. I think if we developed a fair and progressive taxes, we can lower taxes for the middle class and the working class and ask the rich to stop paying their fair share.
This is way out of whack with what we're talking about here. I just saw a story when I was driving up here in one of the papers that said that Madeline Kunin is under consideration for the superintendent of schools in New York City?
No, state superintendent of education, yes. This is Madeline Kunin, who was 3-time governor of the state, the first woman governor to be elected 3 times, who defeated Bernie in 1986.
We don't want to talk about that
story. Madeline, who has been very close to President Clinton, was one of the women who kind of stood by him during the tough days of 1992, and was named Deputy Secretary of Education under Dick Riley, and apparently is a finalist for this job in New York. As a matter of fact, saw her.
I saw her on the screen earlier. Madison, Wisconsin, another state capital, a progressive city they call it. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm a high-level quadriplegic from Madison, and I've been trying to become employable for the last 10 years and working towards those goals. Are you people familiar with the current barriers that are involved with some of the delivery systems in the government to employment for people with severe long-term disabilities? And I've been doing some numbers lately on employment, and it appears that we could, if we were allowed to be employable, we could represent tax savings, direct tax benefit to the taxpayers of America of about $37 billion a year just by getting through the convoluted process of government. How do we approach that, sir?
Mr. Sanders?
Well, the gentleman makes a good point. Clearly, it is my view that disabled people in this country have every right to function in every way that anybody else can and should function. And I am a strong supporter of that process, and would tell you that one of the concerns that we're having now about this contract on America is there will be cutbacks for disabled people.
Let's take a call from Seattle next. Go ahead, please. Hello, Seattle.
Hello, thank you very much. The statement by Bernie Sanders that the rich are getting richer was does he want to take away the money from Oprah Winfrey, who was under the Carter administration on welfare, and under President Reagan, she became a multimillionaire. He is speaking like a true Marxist socialist revolutionary. He should not be called an independent. He is a socialist. He ran as a socialist Marxist in Vermont.
Well, thank you for telling me what I ran at. I might know what I ran at, and I ran as an independent. If the gentleman, we have a lot of people who worry about the rich. I think it might be a good idea to start worrying about working people and middle-income people. We have got to deal with the reality that the standard of living and the real wages of American workers is in radical decline. Since the last 20 years, 80% of American families have seen a decline in their real incomes or economic stagnation, while the very richest people are becoming much richer. Now, I know it is not fashionable to talk on national television about that issue. That's an issue we're not supposed to talk about. That is the most important reality facing America. 1%, the richest 1% of the population owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. That is the most unfair distribution of wealth in the industrialized world. It's obscene and it's wrong.
You're a political observer. You know, you can't walk around here without everybody's talking into their sleeve.
Right.
We're hearing all these two-way radios and people with phones and people with things in their ears and all that. What's it doing to American politics?
Well, basically, it's homogenizing it to an enormous degree. You don't run, apart from Vermont, you pretty much run in Arkansas like you run in California, like you run in Wisconsin, like you run in Tennessee. And that is because of the extent to which so TV has set a new agenda and has homogenized the country, and so consequently issues are no longer as localized as they once were. And that's why conferences like the NGA is so important, because it does, you know, for governors who are really kind of dealing with their own local problems, it's important for them to get together at conferences such as these to discover that they're not alone and that there are sort of common solutions that they can work out. So that's one of the major changes that has taken place, the nationalization of politics in this country has been its greatest transformation.
Burlington, Iowa, you're next.
Yeah, it'd be hard to beat your city, but our city's pretty good for the Midwest. But it's really interesting hearing what you said about, you know, sounds pretty good. Visit ours sometime, you'll like it too. What I think's really good is I like the independent spirit of Vermont, and I also like the way you're describing it as instead of left and right, it is more top to bottom in America. And there is a top pyramid that is controlling what's going on. And they're getting into Congress right now with the new toys and writing the bills. And it's really outrageous. And I hope you keep speaking out, and I hope the rest of America is listening.
How do you get along with your own leadership?
But before I do, let me respond to that question, because the gentleman is absolutely right. You have the outrage now, and no one even makes a secret of it, that the lobbyists, you talk about lobbyists funding this thing, in Congress, the lobbyists are actually writing the legislation for the chemical companies. A friend of mine was on the committee. Everybody is embarrassed because the Republican who offered the amendment didn't even know what he was talking about. People say, hey, let the lobbyists come down here and tell us what's going on. You don't know what's going on. It is an outrage, and the gentleman is quite right. The most important point, and again, I understand the media doesn't talk about it because increasingly the media is owned and controlled by big money. The rich are getting much richer. Middle class is shrinking, and the poor are getting poorer. That is a statistical fact. 20 years ago, this country led the world in terms of the wages and benefits our workers received. Today, we are in 13th place. And it appalls me that certainly the Republican leadership, and far too rarely is the Democratic leadership talking about that issue, saying, how can we raise wages in America? How can we create decent paying jobs for our people rather than the part-time temporary jobs that are being created?
What were you doing before you got into politics?
I was a writer and a film strip producer. I wrote film strips for Vermont history, and on New England history.
Are you still teaching?
Am I still teaching? Yes, indeed. Going to my 28th year at the University of Vermont coming up, and more than half my life has been spent there. And much of my early life was spent arguing with Bernie in the library at the university, and Bernie was telling me all of his great plans and dreams. I said, forget it, kid, it's not going to happen.
Do you support him?
Do I support him? I voted for Bernie half the time, and for Democrats the other half of the time. But this is a phenomenon, and it's been fascinating to watch. You know, as a Congress scholar, and to realize that third-party candidates have had a very short half-life in Congress, and to have my own congressman, person I know well, and whose family I know, succeed to this great degree. It's been a wonderful perspective, close perspective on the process.
One representative from the state of Vermont.
Yes.
And you are it.
For better or for worse, and people strongly disagree on that, I am it.
They can't take our sole congressman away. The Constitution requires that every state at least one.
Next call comes from one of the 22 Springfields in America, this time Missouri. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. Like the previous caller, I'd just like to thank Mr. Sanders for the good work he does in Congress. I think he's a breath of fresh air, and I think he's really the conscience of that institution. And as a Democrat, I wish more members of my own party would kind of take a clue from him and maybe get back to the roots of what made our party great and what our party needs to do. And, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Carr.
The caller made a good point, if I can pick up on that, Brian. And I would say, and I'm not a Democrat, but I think many Democrats would agree with me. What the caller said is the Democratic Party, read what Harry Truman said in 1948. There is virtually, and Truman was a moderate Democrat. The progressives were upset about him because he was too conservative. He said things about the class structure of America in 1948 virtually no Democrat will say today. And what has been said often enough, you don't need another Republican Party. We need a party to speak for the vast majority of the people whose standard of living is in decline. The gentleman makes a very good point.
When we find you in the classroom, what are you teaching?
I'm teaching courses on leadership and elections and political parties, and as I say, I sort of wander around giving interviews to anyone with a steno pad and a microphone.
Do you go to the Democratic caucus meetings?
I am not a member of the Democratic caucus. On occasion, I am invited and allowed in. I do go on occasion.
San Francisco, go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I'm actually from Vermont originally. I was born and raised in the Northeast Kingdom, which is a section I think Mr. Nelson referenced before in terms of the NRA. My question for Mr. Sanders are two of them, actually. One, what does he think are the three important issues for Vermont right now today? And my second question is, I made about $80,000 last year. Why should I pay 7 to 8 times more taxes, federal taxes, than someone who makes $20,000 a year?
Okay. What are the three most important issues facing Vermont? Like the rest of the country, the standard of living of Vermont workers is in decline. We are losing our manufacturing base, and the new jobs that are being created are often service industry jobs that pay people $5 or $6 an hour. So how can we rebuild our manufacturing base and have jobs that pay people decent wages? That's number one. Second problem that we have is a very tragic problem that impacts not only Vermont, of course, but Wisconsin and many other rural states, and that is our dairy farmers are just getting clobbered something terribly. In the last 15 years, the income, the price that farmers are getting for their milk in Vermont has declined in real dollars by about 50%. So our family farmers, who have been the backbone of this state for 200 years, are being driven off of the land. And I think the third issue is how we keep the character of the state. When you talk about Walmart, this state is one of the most very rural states. It is an extraordinarily beautiful state. Brian, if you have a few minutes, have a few hours, drive around the state of Vermont. It is extraordinarily beautiful. And many of us think that the future of our state is in keeping it as a beautiful state and not having shopping malls and more roads all over the place.
Just drove up here from the south, and I think every city in the state's named with a B. I went to Bennington and Brattleboro and Barry and
Burlington.
No, it's a wonderful state, but one of the things that we have to be aware of is it becoming a theme park, and where we will sort of sell only our beauty and sell it only to the tourists, and consequently there are no real jobs in that for our children. They'll end up either being chambermaids or pumping gasoline or running ski lifts.
Got time for one more call, but I want to ask you also the same question I asked Mr. Sanders, that when people come here to visit, what are the things that they'll say, I don't believe you do things that way, after we take this call? Iowa City, Iowa. Go ahead, please. You're on the air. Hello, Iowa City.
Like the representative, he's used the term rich. Could he please define what level rich is and where he would start taxing them and what would be the tax rate?
I think if we understand that the wealthiest 1% of the population today are paying over $80 billion less in taxes than they would have paid if we maintained the 1977 tax rate. And I should tell you that in 1977, this country was a lot more prosperous country than it is today. That would make me happy. I think President Clinton made a good faith effort when he first came elected. I think the bottom line for single people was at $100,000, and for families, I believe, at $130,000. I think at that point, and making it very progressive, it is insane. People don't know this, but as a result of Gingrich's tax proposals, the largest corporations in America, AT&T, etc., may be paying nothing in taxes if that proposal gets through in coming years. That is basically insane.
What would you tell?
Well, what they're going to find is that the skies are blue, they're not smoky, that you don't see the air, like you do in other parts of America, that Vermonters are a lot more friendly than they've been led to believe. The taciturn Yankee who answered nope and yup, he's long gone. Actually, he probably sold the land and moved to Florida.
Population going up or down here?
It's stabilized. It really the big jump was in the 60, 70, and 70 to 80 census, but since then it's been rolling flat. It's not growing that fast.
Do you ever intend to run for a higher office?
As Gary indicated, it's somewhat a miracle that I am in the United States House of Representatives. For me, that's a pretty high office, so very happy to be there right now.
Congressman Sanders and Gary Nelson, professor at the University of Vermont, thank you both very much for giving us a little picture of what it's like to live here in Burlington, Vermont. Our time's up for this day of covering the 87th annual meeting of the National Governors Association. We'll be back on Monday morning for our morning journal. David Broder of the Washington Post kicks it off at 7 o'clock East Coast time. And then we'll be covering Senator Dole's speech as the morning goes on. Have a good day.